Lunacid was a game that was released in Halloween of 2023, and it was created by Kira LLC, the same person who created Spooky's Jump Scare Mansion back in 2015. And that being said, what can I say about this game? It's fantastic, but I'll get more into it as it goes on in the video. But first of all, the atmosphere and the thematics of the game is a 10 out of 10. This game oozes atmosphere, the story, and the setting, and I really like the overall scheme of the art style and the way that it fits in. It's kind of this decrepit world, but it's this like medieval kind of period world, and the stylization and everything is just so on point. And it really does feel like you're in this world, this fantasy land, and you're completely immersed into it. It's like such a enthralling experience that just captivates you from the first moments of gameplay. Like even just the narration at the beginning, the story, the great sea beast jumping out of the water, like all of that just enthralls you right away. And so as soon as you open up the game, the atmosphere, even the UI, adds to the atmosphere. It's like a 10 out of 10 all across the board. I was so immersed in this game when I first started playing it. And as far as the UI goes and everything, it's a faithful and beautiful recreation of a lot of late 90s, early 2000s kind of PC dungeon crawler games. So you can think of games like Kingsfield on PlayStation 1 and 2. And I think that's what they're going for, is that stylization and also that kind of more hardcore dungeon crawler gameplay. And while the music and atmosphere is not vast in its quantity, but the ambience and music that's there, it's a delight to the ears. So what I mean is, like, most levels have 1 to 2 soundtracks and 1 or 2 ambient tracks. So every level has about 4 pieces of music. Now, if you compare that to, like, a super big budget video game with orchestras and all this stuff, like, the music is not, there's not a lot of it, but every single piece was finely crafted to fit the specific themes of that level and that world building that level is trying to convey inside of this fantasy land that you're in the world of Lunacid. And it just, every bit it doesn't miss. Every single one hits. It's like a 10 out of 10 banger on each single piece of music that's in the game, and it fits perfectly for the levels that you're exploring at the time. Like, each one is fitted thematically and properly to one another. And speaking of the levels, the level design they're not too short, but they're not exactly long, at least not at first. There are some levels that drag on for a bit too long, but that comes into an issue I'll talk about later, but each level is designed to be very varied and unique. They all stand out, and they're amazing again with the ambience. It's doing wonders on each level. Same thing for the music. But each level is very easily recognizable from one another. You don't really see a lot of repeating assets. You actually don't see any that I'm aware of as far as repeating assets are concerned, because each level feels extremely unique. So the level design is fantastic. It's amazing. Now onto the combat and the magic system. It's pretty simplistic. I mean, it's a dungeon crawler game, and if that's a good or a bad thing, it's really up to your interpretation and your preference when it comes to retro games, because retro games tend to be a bit more simple. And I think it's absolutely fine in this game. I think it suits the thematics of the game very well. I think it does an admirable job of faithfully recreating a 90s experience. Now, while that isn't the most engaging or enthralling gameplay, especially if you played something like Skyrim, where, it's a lot more engaging, both animation-wise and the way that the combat feels, it's not as engaging as that, but it's definitely a step up from games like Morrowind, and I would even say it's better than Oblivion in some aspects. But personally, I think it's a fun thing. I don't think it takes away from the game. I do think it being simplistic adds to the retro style of the game that they're going for, and I think it suits perfectly fine into the game itself. I think it definitely suits what they were going for and what they were trying to achieve. They're the vision of the game. I don't think the combat takes so much away from it to where it's just so boring you wouldn't want to play it. I think it definitely adds to the old school feeling of it, and that it also immerses you in a way, because you're not doing these stylish combo attacks. You're not playing God of War and like the original God of War trilogy. You're not like chain comboing, meat grinding enemies, slapping them up and down. You're just this person in this world exploring, doing your best to make it to the next level, and you're just killing things in a way that feels very natural. And I think that works wonders for the game. I think the combat being simplistic doesn't hinder the game at all. In fact, I think it adds to the ambience that they were going for. As far as the weapons and magic themselves, despite the very simplistic combat system, the weapons are very varied. The way that stat allocation works on weapons and magic is also very varied. So each playthrough is going to be a bit different. You know, obviously you're going to have your magic character, you're going to have your thief character, your warrior character. You're going to have all these different character archetypes. And they even throw in some very interesting ones like vampires, who have their own system of being weak to fire, but their health regens naturally over time, which is very unique and very interesting. I actually really like the whole idea that the vampire regenerates, but they're weaker to fire, and it actually changes the way you play the game quite dramatically. So as far as like it being simplistic, it still has variety. In fact, the weapon variety and the magic variety, despite it having a simple combat system, there's a lot of things to do. There's a lot of things to work with, even from class selection, which again, that's another thing that this game has, is class selection. And but there is one thing that, because it's a retro game, there is one thing that that did kind of trip me up, and that is the difficulty. This game is simultaneously one of the most simple and easiest games to play for me, but also one of the most challenging for some reason. It seems like the lack of save points sometimes in the game is very brutal, very punishing. It seems like you're going on forever in the levels to get to a new save point, and you can't just quit the game whenever. You have to save first before you can quit. So what ends up happening a lot of the time is, in a play session, I'll run out of time or I'll have to go do something, and you can't pause the game, because if you open up the menu, stuff is still happening. It's kind of like Dark Souls in that regard. And let's say you're like a 30-minute walk from a save point, and it's just like, well, do I walk back and save, or do I keep pressing forward with the chance of dying and not even making it to the save point because I'm rushing and not taking my time? And so it's very tense. And so that can be a good thing, but it can also be a super frustrating thing for a more casual player who wants a more casual experience. And so this is a game that comes on very easy at the start, but I think once you get past the forest, I think that's when things start to get a bit more rough. I think once you enter the crypt, I think that's when the game difficulty spikes up quite dramatically, and I think that's when the save points become extremely sparse. I don't want to spoil too much of the game, but I think that's when the game kicked up the difficulty very drastically. And even the forest itself is a bit confusing and complex, but it's not bad. It's pretty serviceable. There's a lot of shortcuts back, and in that way, the world is actually really well thought out, because there is a lot of shortcuts. There is a lot of interconnecting world. It's that feeling from Dark Souls 1, when you played Dark Souls 1 for the first time, where places would loop back to each other, and you're like, wow, okay, that's like, the world feels alive. It feels like there's multiple branching paths that all lead back to one place. And so it does have that really, this world building experience that it's so immersive. It's hard to describe in words just how amazing this game is in terms of atmosphere and immersion. It really, like, you can sink hours into the game and not even realize it, because you're just living in this world for the time that you're playing it, despite the fact that the game itself overall is pretty short. I think it's around 10 hours if you've played a game like this before, and I'd say if you haven't, it's probably 20 to 25 hours, which for an indie game that's this cheap, you know, at full price, Lunacid is $13.99. It's $14 for a game of this price. Having 20 to 30 hours of casual content, if you're not someone who's played a game like this before, that's a lot of content for a $14 video game. And to be honest, I think it's the best value you're going to get in terms of an indie game. That being said, there is the price to performance ratio. $14 for a game like this is an absolute steal, and the fact that it goes on sale for as low as $8, $7, I mean, you're just getting a steal of a value for that. And again, this is just one playthrough, and the fact that there's multiple classes means that you can have multiple playthroughs of this game. And so there's a lot to do, and on top of all the things to do is that there's a lot of cool secrets to find. There's a lot of hidden passages. There's a lot of secret items, secret weapons, secret magic. There's so many secrets just in general that you can find that you won't find them all in your first playthrough, so you're gonna have to play a second playthrough if you're a completionist, or you just want to experience everything the game has to offer. And so what ends up happening is that instead of, being 20 hours, your next playthrough is going to be a bit shorter because you know where to go and what to do. So your next playthrough is going to be like 10 hours, 8 hours maybe. But what ends up happening is you replay it 5 or 10 different times trying to make sure you get everything, and so you end up sinking hundreds of hours in this game very easily. I think it's very easy to sink 100, 200, maybe even 300 hours in this game if you want to experience everything it has to offer and you want to play everything that it has to offer. And 300 hours of gameplay and experience to be had and immersion to be had in a game that's $14, I mean, that's completely uncomparable. There's nothing on the market that's even comparable to that. The closest experience I've had to that is probably Oblivion, Morrowind, and Skyrim back when they released, but those were full budget games. Those were $60 on release. This is $14 and has been for years, and it goes on sale for like $8. And while you don't have NPCs in the same way that you do in those games, which the NPCs that are in this game are amazing. I love their personality. They're very charming, and the Forest Lady is my waifu, and I will fight any single person that says anything bad about her at all. She's my favorite shopkeeper. Fight me IRL about it. But yeah, I mean, the NPCs, they're so charming in a way, and the story itself is so enthralling. It's like, it's this mystery that I want to solve. It's this mystery that pushes you forward. The story is really sparse in between the actual levels, but the story that you do get, you piece it together slowly, and it's very interesting. And it reminds me a lot of Dark Souls and Kingsfield, where the story isn't told to you. You have to figure it out using context clues and the history of the place and the land. And so what ends up happening is that you're just so immersed that you want to figure out what's happening in this place. You want to figure out the way to get out of the well. And it's just so amazing. I cannot recommend this game enough. And after it's all said and done, I haven't even talked about 90% of the things I wanted to talk about. But if I was here, I would be here all day gushing and glazing this game up as much as possible. But I'm trying to do a pretty simple review, so I will just say Lunacid out of 10 is an 8 out of 10. It is a B+ to an A-. I would put it an A-. I think it deserves an A. It's not an A in the sense that it's a 9 out of 10, because there are some problems with the game. Again, the brutal difficulty spiking about halfway through the game is that's kind of rough, and there are some things about the game, like the simplistic combat, that while I personally don't think there's anything wrong with it, I could see how people who have been spoiled by newer video games and the way that they are engaging with their combat, I definitely could see that being a problem for some people who may even like the game otherwise. And the magic being very simplistic, and sometimes the puzzles are a bit like really bad confusing, like they're kind of really hard to figure out at first. So I could see people struggling, and that might be frustrating, and so that might take away some of the fun. So I can't in good conscience give it a 10 out of 10 just for those reasons. But otherwise, I think the game is perfect. I think everything about this game, I cannot glaze this game enough. I cannot give this game enough praise. It's an 8 out of 10, and it's a high 8 out of 10. There's only a few caveats that I have about the game, and those are the caveats. Also, I've had a few glitches where NPCs would just stop talking to me. There would be things where I would fall through the map, or I would get stuck on some things and have to reload a save, which is super frustrating. So there's a few glitches in there that kind of keep it from being that 10 out of 10. But otherwise, I'd recommend buying this game full price. I wouldn't even wait for a sale. I'd buy it right now. Full price, $14 is absolutely a joke for how amazing this game is. The dev could have very easily asked me for $40, and I probably would have bought it for that much, to be honest, just because I like the game that much. So go and play it. Go and buy it. Don't take my word for it. I'm only showing videos of the first few levels because I don't want to spoil too much. But this game is absolutely amazing, and it was probably one of the best experiences I've had in a dungeon crawler game in probably like 10 years. So yeah, go buy it right now. Thanks for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed the review, and I'll see you next time. Peace.